Speaker, to the Prime Minister, does he stand by all his statements?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, to the Prime Minister, why did he tell the New Zealand public on Monday that, quote, yes, they, the Cabinet Office, looked at the translation?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, because I believed it to be correct, and actually the Cabinet Office has written to me to say that the information they provided to me could well have left me with that impression. They apologise for that.
Could well have left him with the impression. Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David
Speaker,
Cunliffe.
did the Prime Minister personally, or through directing his office, specifically ask the Cabinet Office to look at the English translation of Aurovida's Chinese website when this issue first came to light last week? And if not, why not?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I don't have all the details of who contacted the Cabinet Office, but my understanding was they looked at all the information required.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order. Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, these are deliberately very straight and simple factual questions, and supplementary to
I'm
Mr
going
Speaker.
to ask the member to repeat his question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Did the Prime Minister personally, or through personally directing his office, specifically ask the Cabinet Office to look at the English translation of Aurovida's Chinese website when this issue first came to light last week? And if not, why not?
Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The same answer. I don't have the information with me of what was asked for, but...
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Order, point of order.
Mr Speaker, the question asked...
Order. I've heard the question.
Mr Speaker...
Order. I've heard the question. We've put it twice. The Prime Minister has chosen to answer it by saying he doesn't have that information. Order!
Mr Speaker, point of order, Mr Speaker.
I'll hear from the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that the question went to his own personal knowledge or direction and not to the actions of any other party, how is it possible, sir, for him to not have the information about his own personal action?
Well, I can easily answer that before I accept a... No, it could be that the Prime Minister on this occasion feels he doesn't have the information because he cannot recall it accurate enough, and it's in his hands for him to decide how he's going to answer the questions. Order! If members want to stay for the balance of question time, then when I'm on my feet, I expect them to be silent. I have attempted to assist the member to get an answer that is more helpful. The Prime Minister has chosen how he is to answer that question, and that is his responsibility. The member then has further supplementaries, and who knows, he may get an additional supplementary to help elucidate the answer he may require.
Point of order.
Right Honourable
Mr Speaker, by the nature of Mr Cunliffe's question, it may be the Prime Minister can seek defence in not being prepared. But if you look at question 7, where he gave honest answers to questions asked on this matter, he has had now 4 hours to be prepared, so he should be down here today ready to go and not be hiding behind the defence he is.
Order. And that is for this House and for the public of New Zealand to judge. Further supplementaries?
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Further supplementary?
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, on previous occasions, sir, where there has been an apparent or possible obfuscation by a minister of a direct question, Mr Speaker, you have previously given members on this side 3 opportunities to ask the supplementary, and the minister concerned 3 opportunities to give a direct answer.
I have ruled. I've given it 2 goes.
Yes, Mr Speaker.
And I've determined that that's enough. The member has further
Mr Speaker, supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Does the Prime Minister understand that the statement by his office that the deletion of the Chinese version of the website means, and I quote, there is no longer a conflict of interest, close quote, means that there must have been an actual conflict of interest to start with? That's right. And if not, what does he understand by that statement?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no, the member's not correct.
Supplementary question.
Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question, Honourable David
Mr.
Cunliffe.
Speaker, has the Prime Minister seen the Chief Ombudsman's report from October 2012 that states, and I quote, "If a minister refers to Cabinet Office advice publicly in a way that is misleading or exaggerated, the countervailing public interest in disclosure is likely to outweigh the need for confidentiality. And will he therefore table the Cabinet Office advice now for members of this House?"
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no, but I do actively encourage the member to take the matter up with the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman will then look at all of the advice I've seen, and the Ombudsman will, guess what, not release it, because they'll know that I'm correct.
The underfunded Ombudsman, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, supplementary question.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
On what day?
Order. Point of order, the right Honourable
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition, when he got to his feet, impugned the reputation of the Ombudsman of New Zealand. I think that's a very serious matter, and the member might want to reflect on that.
Order. I didn't hear the remark. If the member made a comment that he thinks is unparliamentary...
Speaking to the point of order, Mr. Speaker.
I'll hear from the member.
Speaking to the point of order, if the Speaker didn't hear it, the words I said were the underfunded Ombudsman, and that was going to the point that underfunded, Mr. Speaker, if I may, that goes to the point that the Prime Minister is hiding behind an officer of Parliament, that he is insufficiently funded, and full knowledge there will be a long delay before an answer can be given. That's impugning him, sir, not the Ombudsman.
Member. I will accept the member for what he has said, and therefore we will move forward. Further supplementary?
Supplementary, Mr.
Honourable
Speaker.
David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, does he agree that there is a conflict of interest arising from revelations this morning that Judith Collins had a previously undeclared dinner with her, quote, close personal friends that included the chairman of Aurovida and a senior Chinese border control official, while on a taxpayer-funded trip to China, in which she also visited Aurovida and endorsed or promoted its products?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that the accumulation of meetings that the Minister held in China could lead to the perception of a conflict of interest. And that's why I believe, Mr. Speaker, that transparency is very important. I believe, for instance, if you get secret donations through a trust, you should make those...
Order.
So that's the standard now.
Order. Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, does he consider it merely a perception of a conflict of interest that all this occurred with a company to which the Minister's husband is one of only 3 directors, which is supplied by a company substantially owned by the chairperson, the President of the National Party, and from which his party has received $56,000 in political donations himself?
Order.
Mr. Speaker,
Right
3
Honourable
points.
Prime Minister.
Firstly, one, I think it can lead to a perception of a conflict of interest. Secondly, what's important here is we actually do know what's taken place. We don't when it comes to the trust funds of Mr. Cunliffe.
Order. The Prime Minister has answered the question.
Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, if Mrs. Collins does not understand that this combination of circumstances reflects a serious conflict of interest, is she fit to be a minister in his government?
Right Honourable Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
yes, she's quite fit to be a minister. I actually think my own view is that Judith Collins is an outstanding minister, but I think that in this particular occasion she's got this wrong.
So my question is to the Prime Minister now. Were all his answers to questions relating to the Honourable Judith Collins and Aurovida checked to ensure they were true? If not, why not?
Speaker,
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, yes, it's the standard practice in my office to ensure that reasonable steps are taken to check proposed answers to both written and oral questions I might give this House.
So many questions.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston Peters.
When Judith Collins, A, had secret meetings with a Chinese border official, her policy advisor, and the Chinese managing director of her husband's company, Oravida, and a New Zealand diplomat and New Zealand consul. B, did not merely stop for a cup of tea on the way to the airport, but had lunch and dinner with the company. Or C, as Minister of Justice and ACC, held meetings on trade matters well outside her portfolios. And D, facilitated access for products obtained by Oravida from Sanfords, a company owned in part by the National Party President's family. How can he now not sack her?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, as I said earlier, I think Judith Collins has been an outstanding minister. I think she's got a big contribution to make for New Zealand. I think in this particular case she put herself in the place of being held to be accused of a perception of conflict of interest. I think that's unwise. I'm sure the minister's learnt from that.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Right Honourable Winston.
How can he say, and I quote him, "Transparency is a good thing. As Prime Minister, I have led that charge," in quotes, when page 5 of the Judith Collins Cabinet Travel Report was blanked out entirely when the travel report was released to me?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'm not responsible for that, the blanking out. That comes from her office. But Mr Speaker, here's the important point. That looks awfully like the number of donors that we know that gave David Cummins money.
Order.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Right Honourable Winston.
What about the number of donors? What about the number of donors in the White Matter Club, if that's an issue?
Order. I'm not sure where the question is. If the member wants to ask a supplementary...
Well, I'm asking a supplementary question, but he decided to put that at issue at the last answer.
And I heard that.
Righto. Here we go.
I hadn't had to hear it.
How can he say, and I quote him, how can he say as Prime Minister, and I quote him, "Transparency is a good thing. As Prime Minister, I have led that charge," in the quotes, when he refuses to release the Cabinet advice on this matter, when that advice was never checked against the Chinese translation, when he totally misled questioners when he claimed the advice was checked against the Chinese translation, and when the Minister herself has so grossly failed to tell the truth over the real extent and import of her meetings involving Oravida.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'll refute many of the assertions in that question.
Point of order, Speaker. Speaker, point of order.
Point of order. Right Honourable Winston.
Speaker, I think I'm entitled to some accountability in this House, and so is the country.
Order.
I've asked a serious question.
The difficulty was the question was excessively long, and the Prime Minister's chosen to answer it the way he has, just saying he doesn't agree with the assertion. The member wants specific answers. Ask a specific question.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Mr.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
For example, Mr. Speaker, when he admits last night...
Order. Could the member just come to his point of order?
Well, I'm raising a point of order, and it's this.
And would he come to his point of order?
Well, how can he say he doesn't agree with the assertion when at the beginning of the week he said the translation was checked, and last night he said to the public on TV it wasn't?
Because the member started his question with words, "How can he say?" and then went on with a whole lot of things. The Prime Minister got to his feet and said, "I don't agree with the assertion." That's an answer that addresses...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order. Right.
Speaker, no, I didn't begin that way. I began with his quote. So how can he dispute that?
I have ruled that the question's been addressed. Order. Member will resume his seat. My patience with the member won't last much longer. If the member wants to leave the chamber, I can ask him to do so. If he wants to conclude his questions, he should move to his supplementary questions. Otherwise, we will immediately go to the next question. Supplementary question.
All right.
Supplementary question, Right Honourable Winston.
How can he say, quotes, "Transparency is a good thing"? As Prime Minister, I have led that charge when he refuses to release the Cabinet advice. The advice was never checked against a Chinese translation. Then he claimed that it was, and the Minister has so grossly failed to tell the truth over the full extent and import of her meetings.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, because I stand by the view that transparency is a good thing, and Mr Speaker, successive governments have followed the same position. The advice from the Cabinet Office isn't released.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Right Honourable Winston.
Given that he sacked Richard Worth as a precedent over a clear conflict of interest, much less than this one,
Order.
what has the Minister of Justice got on the Prime Minister that he won't sack her in circumstances and reasons far more serious than he has used to sack others?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the member needs to pay attention. Richard Worth was not sacked for that, and if he goes back and looks at the records in 2009, when there was a potential conflict of interest, I took the same approach and said that I thought the minister was being very unwise.